Welcome to another episode of Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Amid the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance, we have an opportunity to reflect on one of the most significant eras of cultural production. The Harlem Renaissance brought together Black writers, artists, musicians, and intellectuals who celebrated Black culture. Thousands of Black folk migrated to Harlem, and it became the center of a rich cultural, political environment fraught with complications, but still understood to be the representation of the best that Black America had to offer. Word traveled across the nation about this place where Black Americans could be safe to live. But do you know who is the father of Harlem? Who laid the foundation for Harlem? Well, after leaving a career in barbering, Philip A. Payton Jr. landed a job as a porter in Harlem in a real estate office and was enraged by what he witnessed. White landlords providing unfair, demeaning treatment to Black tenants. He decided he would act. And this is where he would find his passion and his purpose. Once deciding to confront unfair housing practices set up against Black families, he became a real estate broker and founded the Philip A. Payton Jr. Real Estate Company in the early 1900s. He bought empty buildings to move in Black families. He fought against white-owned tenements who were evicting Black tenants. So he decided to buy more buildings and evict the white tenants. Now that's gangster. Everyone who was everyone knew Payton Jr., including notable men like Booker T. Washington. His real estate pursuits began to unlock the emergence of Harlem. He wasn't afraid to stand up against housing discrimination, but he also disrupted the system, making it favorable for Black families. His real estate company became one of the most well-known Black-owned real estate companies in New York City, the Caribbean, and even Europe. Before his death in 1917, he owned over 12 buildings in Harlem. He even acquired properties in Berlin and Munich. The era that we recognize as the Harlem Renaissance would emerge 2 years after his death. Now, the legacy of the Harlem Renaissance continues in major cities throughout this country with a continued emphasis on Black intellect and culture. Joining me here today are two stewards of that very legacy. This remarkable sister is the founder of the National Commission of Black Arts and Entertainment. She's the owner of Coco Deluxe Escapes and Black Dove Properties and Consulting. She's a constant advocate for Black creators, and she's also a philanthropist. Daphney Thomas. And we also have joining us is this outstanding sister who is the founding CEO and president of the Robert O'Neal Multicultural Arts Center, affectionately known as ROMAC. And she's also the executive director at the Queen City Foundation, where she's also have been an educator, she's a community leader, and a passionate curator of Black culture. Toilynn O'Neal Turner. Thank you both for joining me here on Got Time. And so definitely it's a pleasure to have you both here.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's my understanding, we were talking before we got on, and I've only visited Harlem once. But you've visited numerous times.
Yeah, I've been a couple times.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about, the Harlem Renaissance, what comes to your mind, or what comes to your mind when you think about Harlem in general?
Oh man, super Blackness in the most beautiful and excellent way. That's always been the first thing that came to mind when I think of Harlem.
Yeah, I think of excellence, power,
yes,
wealth, and actually just community, connectivity.
Okay. I will say, doing the research, and when learning more about the real estate development through Philip A. Payton Jr. It's critical to understand that, the capital that needed to be built to lay down the foundations for those families to be there, which helped create that cultural dynamics. So do you see that still relevant today in Harlem in your visits back to the community?
Yes and no. I mean, Harlem's blackness is still there, but definitely just like many great black communities that had us as the foundation of the wealth and the prosperity, gentrification and dynamic change of the mission of what that neighborhood represents has happened. And so I think of Harlem as this place of still having, you can see the rich heritage. There's still many African-American owned businesses and still many very fluent black people still live there. But it definitely has a different tone. It's still a beautiful place to go. You can walk the streets and feel the culture, but it definitely has changed.
Now, Daphney, we were talking about what was one of your favorite places to go while you were there in Harlem and visiting, or someone who has never visited before. What are some areas or what are some locations or where they should go and visit?
In Harlem, oh man, I've had some of the best times just literally going up and down Malcolm X Boulevard, like just hanging out, talking to people, seeing Dapper Dan just walk up and down the street just blew me away.
You saw Dapper Dan?
I saw Dapper Dan a couple times.
What did he have on?
Something very dapper out of his haberdashery, just looking like, you know, a million gazillion bucks.
All right.
But I would say, I mean, I love going to the Apollo. I love going to the Schomburg, which is the research center there. The Malcolm X Marketplace is also somewhere that I like to go and, you know, spend a little money to support the local, you know, people that live there in the community. And Corner Social, that's the place to go hang out.
Corner Social?
Corner Social. I think it's on like 135th and Malcolm X. But yeah, those are my little spots.
So, Daphney, how about you? Are there any special places in Harlem that you like to go visit?
I mean, I definitely love Sylvia's. I like to eat. So, I'm glad she didn't say that because I was going to be like, what about, I mean, everywhere she said.
Now, what
awesome.
do you order when you go to Sylvia's, though?
Oh, shrimp and grits.
All right.
Shrimp and grits. Everything there is awesome. And I think it's just the fact that during my time, I haven't been for a couple of years, but I remember at one point I got to meet members of the family of the owner, and I just thought that was so awesome that the families were still maintaining the restaurant and producing the same great results. You don't see a lot of family passed down businesses that have us black people running them. And so it was kind of just awesome to be in a space where you felt like you were home.
Right.
And that's kind of what I got from that restaurant.
And I think that's the one unfortunate thing is that, you have these businesses that are started up by these great families, and then the next generation, they don't hold on to those businesses, and they end up dying off. Right. And so, it is great to see that occurring with, Sylvia's. Absolutely. So my next question is, going back to the past, and I know respectively, both of you have worked in museums and, you have a love of history. Are there any writers, artists, or intellectuals from that era that, that stimulate your interest, that, that you really are fond of during that time period?
Yeah. You want to go?
So my four favorite are Jacob Lawrence. I always have loved his work. I am inspired to when I do my own artwork, I always thought that my work resembled his, because he always told stories in his work. His work always had this connection to what was happening right then, but it always brought the past up. He has an Underground Railroad series. He has a series that depicts life in Harlem. And so his work is one of my favorites. And I always love Zora.
Zora Neale Hurston.
Yes, I mean, short-lived in life, but definitely her work has made an impact in mine. Can relate to her experiences being a woman in that space. There's also Aaron Douglas. He's a painter. He did these beautiful silhouette pieces that depict the Bible stories. He also did pieces that depicted slavery and freedom. And so, he did one of the early pieces of slaves seeing the free lands. But his work was silhouette, and he knew how to use light and color to make you feel the work. Yeah. And then there's Augusta Savage. She's a sculptor.
Oh, yes.
A woman sculptor, not talked about in a lot of our history books.
Isn't she the one? They use her sculpture for some currency I believe.
Yes, and Lift Every Voice is one of her very powerful pieces. It's almost like a harp of African people. So yeah, there's so many. I mean, Langston Hughes, of course, most of us are aware of him, and James Van Der Zeer. His photography showed us that wealth and that elegance of that time, and just how beautiful people dressed and carried themselves when they walked down the streets, right?
They were most certainly sharp.
They were sharp.
The brothers and sisters were sharp. I'm talking about the suits, the dresses, the hats. Yes, absolutely.
Definitely gloves, all that stuff that it's a period of time where that was important, but you just recognize people got up and looked like that almost every day. They dressed well every day.
I think my thought process around that was because they were confronted with so much indignity. They wanted to make sure that to be dignified and to reaffirm their humanity. Right. I think it was very purposeful in dressing.
And they were free in themselves and their own community. We often think of that 20s to 30 periods of what Black America was going through collectively. But those Black people in Harlem, they carried themselves free. They had their own entertainment spaces. They had their own restaurants, their own home ownership. And so there was a different air about having that sense of freedom during a time where people were starting to struggle, and Blacks still in certain parts of the South were not necessarily having these privileges and freedoms.
Right. It's that freedom and that safety, the security that they have. Any artists or musicians or intellectuals of that time period for you that connects?
Yeah, what comes to my mind is, obviously Langston Hughes. I'm no expert by any means, but he was one of the first Harlem Renaissance folk that I was introduced to as a kid. So just learning about his poems. And then I always found Zora Neale Hurston to be a very powerful woman. While some people might argue about the idea of her being a separatist or not, just because she was very vocal about the Brown versus Board of Education thing that was going on. I just dig the idea about her being vocal about us being in our power and it's not being connected to what white folks are doing. So just that in itself for me was like, okay, I can really dig her. I just watched this long movie about Zora Neale on YouTube not too long ago with Ruby Dee. Do y'all remember that?
Okay, yeah.
It was really good. Like I watched it nonstop through the commercials and everything. I was just captivated by her life and her story of her life and how she came to be. So yeah, Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah, and Ruby Dee, you talking about a woman, powerful actress. Yeah, I mean, Black excellence and brilliance all around. So I know we're talking a little bit about the past. I want to also talk about a little bit about the present. And so both of you, as I stated before, have been active in maintaining this momentum and this emphasis in art and culture, in Black intellect. And so my question is, what is taking up your time these days? What are you currently working on, to keep that legacy alive? And I'm beginning with you, Toilynn.
Well, I am currently working on remodeling a historic theater here in Cincinnati, the Regal Theater, to be our first African-American multicultural arts center since 1972. Wow. We actually don't have any owned African-American institutions in our city that represent culture and the voice of people of color. And so this project is a $12 million project. We've raised about $3.1 million. We need to raise another $3 million to start construction this year. And we will have the Robert O'Neal Multicultural Arts Center, which will be a home to many arts organizations. It'll be a stage to many companies that do not have a stage, as well as it'll be a space of history and culture where we will preserve Cincinnati's Black history while also teaching cultural history in the region.
Now, for the people who don't know, who is this man named Robert O'Neal?
Yes, so Robert O'Neal, I'm proud to say he was my father. He was an artist and activist here in Cincinnati that lived his life really for the people. He did not believe that many things would happen without people making it happen. And he believed that everyday people, the grassroots movements, is what really made change. And so even this center being named after him is really not for him. He was a very humble dude. He talked a lot. He was very proud of his conversations and his history, but he was very humble in that he didn't need credit for what he did. He did some magnificent things in this city that people do not know, that I want to share. But really because he did believe that we should own and we should have our own things in our communities. Yes. And also the fact that he fought so hard for the Black art movement to be strong in his time, and to really have artists be out front with activism, even though that's what art does anyway. He made sure that with his work and his colleagues' works, that their works were seen in ways in which it made dynamic change in our city. So that's why it's named after him.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Yes.
Daphney, so, and what is taking up your time these days?
What's taking up my time these days is staying afloat. No, literally keeping the organization running with the day-to-day operations, in addition to making sure that we are living out our mission to convene, connect, and celebrate Black people in the arts and entertainment industries. And so we do that through a myriad of different programming that we have. Anywhere from taking families on bus tours around to the cultural centers and Black-owned businesses here in Cincinnati, to making sure that the babies are fed during the summertime with our free breakfast and art program, which is modeled after the Black Panthers free food program. So yeah, just prepping for all of those upcoming things that we have going on, making sure that we are being good stewards of art and community and being a safe space for Black people to come in and see themselves reflected, not just in the programming, but, you know, with myself and volunteers that come in and even on the walls. So that's what I'm doing these days.
I'm curious to hear from both of you about your thoughts about the current state of Black art and culture. One of the things that, you know, I find very fascinating, you know, in my time in Philadelphia, in my many years here in Cincinnati, of seeing how art has publicly displayed. You know, there's murals everywhere on the tallest buildings. You know, it's like it's everywhere. It's inescapable in a lot of cities. It was that way in Philadelphia. I see it here in Cincinnati. I seen it in Atlanta. I remember, you know, taking a picture in front of one of my favorite hip hop groups, Outkast. They got a mural. It's kind of tucked away if you try to find it. You have to really hunt it down. But it's a beautiful mural of those two brothers that's there. So can you talk a little bit, you know, about the how you see the state of Black art and culture?
Well, I think we've had a resurgence. I mean, there was definitely a time during my dad's time from the 70s to the 80s where Black art was booming again, where it became part of the mainstream culture to see it. The BAM movement, the Black art movement that happened in that time period with Nikki Giovanni and artists from New York and other places all coming together to kind of be seen. Then you had kind of almost a pause. You had kind of what I call this level of contemporary art where we really got into museums in the 90s and the early 2000s where they allowed us to be on their walls. And so it became kind of a less energy about the movement, but more about us being in their houses, which is fine because I think we should have been in their houses years ago. And then you had the Black Lives Matter movement, which happened more recently, where it was almost the era of like, let Black art lead this protest. And even though we had COVID where we couldn't get out, Black art was on the internet and social media where we were doing verses, you know, with Monica and different artists and, you know, old school and new school, and really having to use art to heal ourselves and feel safe. And I think we're also still in that momentum where the Black art, as much as we struggle for the financial resources and the opportunities and still to get in their houses, we have a lot of strong art groups that are really learning how to maintain, learning how to work together, and that the Black arts has always had to survive without mainstream support and money. But we're actually in the space of trying to demand that, even in a time where all those resources are being taken away from everybody, it's still time for us to get not just our piece of the pie, but we need to be at the tables. And I think that's why you have institutions trying to be built, and you also have people starting organizations that really get us together as community, and really this empowerment phase of Black arts. I think that's where we are.
Yeah, I like the word that you use, momentum. I'm gonna let that be my word to describe how I feel it's growing right now. It's picking up momentum from what I see. and it's really exciting. It's moving. Black people, we couldn't be artists and creators even if we tried. I think it's just so much of who we are naturally. That anything we do that we just think is living, we are creating, and we are being the influence that the world is watching and has always watched and get everything from. I know that's becoming even more known now that, you know, well, I would say expressed, because we've always known that the eyes were on us.
Yes.
I mean, even with stuff like outside of what we're doing here locally, there's the what am I saying? The Black Girl Art Show, the Black Boy Art Show, and I follow them on social media, and they are packing out big places. And I'm like, all of these Black artists and all of these Black people are coming to buy and support these, you know, to buy the art and support the artists. So that gives me an additional hope to the work that we're doing here in Cincinnati as well.
I had a thought when you were talking, Toilynn, about art, and I'm having to making so sometimes I put H's on words that don't need to be there, and I take them off. But you mentioned healing, and I think back during the pandemic, my youngest daughter, to cope with what was going on in the world during that time. Now, mind you, she never at any time asked for any art supplies, but she asked for art supplies. And she would do her homework virtually, and then she would paint. And she has, in our home, there's like a mini museum of her artwork. And she would paint these landscapes. It might be a waterfront. It might be a jungle, and it will be like the skyline with the moon, you know, the dark. And so I see that our art, and when we think about the Harlem Renaissance, because we're talking about the height of when lynchings were taking place, black bodies swinging from trees and whatever could be held up high. And yet you had this influx of all this artwork being poured out. And so I think, you know, listening to both of you speak, like, art is always being in performance. It's always been a part of our healing and coping mechanism. Would you say, you know?
Definitely. I mean, during COVID, that's what I did. I mean, I had kids on Zoom. I worked in education at the time. And, you know, after being also frustrated and sorry for what they were experiencing and feeling really bad that I couldn't help them more under the circumstances, I painted for the first time in over 15 years. You know, my father used to say, you know, when you get stressed, do some art, you know, go dance, you know, do something creative. And so I used that advice during COVID, and I painted a collection of paintings. Never had any intention of showing anybody any of those. And I think it was Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis had me on their show to talk, and they was like, "What's behind you?" And I said, "That's my art." And they just kind of blew it up. And then I started selling some pieces, which was really nice. But, you know, that whole piece of using that for therapy, I think the world takes art for granted. And when I think about how schools cut the arts and how federally now the arts is at risk, you know, there was a memo that went out today that talked about, you know, the museum and library grant that might be cut that could really put a dent in some of our major institutions that are free and accessible to people. You just think about how selfish and how harming that can be to lose things that actually give us life and give us energy with no work. I mean, the arts doesn't take work to be part of. You know, you can listen, appreciate, and see for free. So for us as a community not to build these worlds where we see all art and we get involved in all aspects of culture with art, that's our door. You don't have to worry about DEI if you go and fill your life with art and creativity of different cultures. You don't have to have labels because the art is already labeled with what you see and how you interpret it. So it's one of those things that I think that we need to pay a lot more attention to. Our ancestors did a great job of giving us the gateway. You know, their works are still here. And how do we preserve and continue that with the next generation is what our job should be.
Yeah. To the healing part of it, I definitely think art should be looked at even more as a healing tool for me. Because just think about like all of the things that you go through just in life, right? and you're holding these things in, like they're going on inside of you, around you, and then you have this opportunity to get it out and express it through outwardly creating something. Like, to me, that's just a powerful tool that can help heal. Just like getting all that's inside of you out in itself is powerful. So I always dig art as a healing tool as well.
Now, I know Toilynn touched on it a little bit, and I want to ask you, Daphney, about this. Mention about the defunding of cultural institutions, libraries, museums, and things of that nature. What is your take and your thoughts about what is being attempted? I'll put it this way: what's being attempted right now?
Let's see. I think my thoughts are, while it is a terrible thing, I think it is also opening up an opportunity for us to support each other more. If we have I don't know how many $1 trillion spending power they say we have, why not turn that inward? And that's something that I've always championed for and been vocal about. And I think this might be an opportunity that's going to push us even more to do that. And, if that's how it has to be, then so be it.
Right. And so one day, 100 years from now, they could be talking about the Cincinnati Renaissance, right? About, and who were I'm serious. I've said this before. Our history is applicable.
Right.
The answers to our struggles today are in knowing our history and what they did, because they were working with less.
Yes.
And was able to do extraordinary things. I will say this. So one question I definitely wanted to ask is, we're all being black in America. We are placed burden upon burden upon us. And my question is, those burdens that we negotiate are usually a soil for a beautiful outcome. So, through your journey and all the work that you've been doing, what has been a burden that actually turned into something beautiful for you? Whether that is, if it is something tangible or something that isn't tangible.
So let me see. I'm gonna get real quick.
Please do. We got time.
so I was let go from a job in a very kind of quiet way. And I was really sad because I had invested a lot of time into that space. I had built what I thought was generations of opportunities and change and growth. And when you get in a space like that, you wonder, like, what's next for me? Like, what's going to be the next thing? And immediately, the opportunity came to take on this huge project, which is something I never imagined, to build this cultural institution, to do a preservation project, to build capacity in a neighborhood that had been gentrified, destroyed, forgotten, the West End, to also work with children and give them a sense of hope and inspiration. And that to me seemed like a lot of weight. But what I've learned from that is that every obstacle is really an opportunity. And those opportunities really can go far when you build the right village. So even in the midst of this project with the success, the goal is to keep building the right village. And that does take a lot of weaning of the ways that you think, from the way that your city thinks, and also from the ways that we are used to doing things. We're used to following great people versus realizing that we have to be great people ourselves in whatever capacity, right? And so I think of these things that I look as obstacles or burdens as really have built character in me to be able to pass the baton a lot quicker than I thought I would, because I think that we also hold on to stuff. We think it's ours.
Yes.
When you build stuff, it is always for the generation behind you. There's always a lamb that has to be sacrificed in order for things to happen with the great strength. So I actually have got vision from working on this project. And I always tell people, no matter where it ends up, the vision that I have about what the process should be to really being great, and not great for everybody else, but great for you and your community, can be obtained by you just staying diligent to what you need to go through to get there. It's not always about the baggage and the damage. It's really about the journey and the processes that you learn, that you can help other people do those processes better.
And you, Miss Daphney? Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Let's see. I would say something similar to yours, Toy. I would say leaving a job a couple years ago. And it was just my first time experiencing like grief of a job, but that is real. And it was a job that I literally remember the day I wrote down all the attributes that I wanted in the job. And it literally manifested a couple years later in this particular position. I felt like I got to bring all of who I was into this position. And then I learned so much along the way. And to have to make the decision to save myself and my mental health and my emotional health, or stay and be complacent with the pay, but know that I was strong enough to make it through all this crazy stuff that started happening seemingly out of the blue. I learned that that's not always like that lamb that you talked about. In that instance, it wasn't me, that I didn't have to be that. And that I did what I said I was going to do, and that it was time for me to move on. But the gifts of that was I had all of these relationships. You talked about the village, all of these relationships with community partners, residents, all kinds of things. And then the learnings and the lessons that not only grew me mentally, but like emotionally, and stretched my capacity to have compassion for people in the community. I would say that experience is definitely the trial, and then the jewels that came from that.
Respectively, and I've gone through that, recently as far as that change. And Eric Thomas, who's a motivational speaker, he talks about not wasting the moment, not wasting that moment that when you unexpectedly something has occurred that was not in your plan. Don't waste that moment, because that moment is preparing you for the next chapter. And I think both of you are living in that new chapter for your respective selves right now. And so for my viewers and listeners, how can they support ROMAC, or how can they be involved or stay tuned to what's going on with the development of the center?
Definitely. So our website is theromac.org. And like I said earlier, we're in the midst of a capital campaign. No penny, no dollar, no change. It's too small. We can do this as a community. Like I keep telling people, we are going to do this. So supporting it financially, advocacy, getting the word out. We do have current programs. We support other organizations all the time that are in this work every day. Supporting them supports us, because as they grow, that's also going to build capacity for the institution that we need for them to help us grow in. So any of those things are helpful. And just keeping following us on social media, liking what we're doing, and also talking to your city leaders. They have a lot of power in where money goes in our city. And this should be a done project. And I'm just hoping that people will help support them to make it happen.
Outstanding. And Daphney, I've been to some of the events that you've curated.
Curated.
Yes. And you will do things. I'm like, how do these two things go together? And I go like, wow, that's brilliant. And so, how can my viewers and listeners check in with you to see, what's going on with you, and you talked about the experiences with families, and you do these vacations, I believe, if you're still doing that, these destinations and so forth.
Oh yeah. So I would say after you give to ROMAC, log on and go to NCBAE, that's ncbae.org, and become a member of our organization. There's a membership level that really fits everybody, from students to seniors to artists. If you're just a supporter, a lot of people like to say, I ain't no artist, but you're a supporter, you want to buy some art, become a member. If you're an institution, you can become a member. And all of those funds go to help fueling the programs that we just talked about. The Breakfast and Art program, the family bus tours, teaching kids emotional intelligence and peer mediation using art, and supporting our monthly artist showcase, Canvas Noir. You can find us on Instagram. I always say if you want to see the work that we're doing like in real time, because I'm always posting and stuff, and if you want to see what we did like 2 seconds ago, you might want to go to IG, not the website. It's NCBAE 2020 on IG, or National Commission for Black Arts and Entertainment on Facebook.
Well, I thank the both of you for taking the time to be on this episode with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate the work that the both of you are doing, not only for our community, but the mark you are leaving in this world.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
In honor of National Poetry Month, I encourage you to get to know a little bit more familiar with those poets from the Harlem Renaissance era. One of those central poets is Claude McKay. The Jamaican-born poet was a militant poet. His writings echoed the collective cries of Black dignity. Constab Ballads, first published in 1912, is a classic collection of poetry including the famous poem, If We Must Die. It was a sonnet dealing with the matter of white-on-black race riots and lynchings. Now, it's been expressed loudly that our resilient story is divisive, that our responses to injustice, our responses to inequality, our responses to an inhumane system are divisive. Our story is more American than any fabrication that a narrow-minded folks can shove down our conscience. Keep in mind that it is our history that's going to help us get through the times that we are dealing with now and the times and for the generations that are here to come. So to my family, those folks working in cultural institutions, getting cultural institutions built, those working in higher education and critical learning institutions, I encourage you to keep your head held high and be empowered by the legacy of our history. Our brilliance has always cast a shadow over the burdens that were upon us. So let those brilliant examples from our history keep us encouraged so that we can be great and so we can continue to create meaningful works to inspire the generations to come. Much appreciation to my special guests, to my viewers and listeners. This is Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Know thy history.